Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony is one of my very favorite kind of shows because the listeners have done our jobs for us. They have provided us the content that we will then provide right back to them. It's like I don't know. I'm trying not to say mama bird regurgitating food into its baby's mouths, but I mean, I don't know how else to explain it. So pretty much get ready for some football vomit. It's time to eat.
Yeah, well, at least we have our title. See how that does on the search engines. I don't even want to know. But we're locked in on it now. We've said it, so
it's too late to go back now.
Start committed. Chewing on that worm, Tom. Gosh, dang it. Now I'm just going to be thinking like, yeah. Did you ever see that Saturday Night Live episode where they did that? Because they brought a guy still lives with his parents. He's like in his 30s, and he brings a date home, but he can't chew food on his own because he has soft teeth. So his parents have always chewed up his food for him and then put it in his mouth. And so they did this during the skit, and you just hear the crowd in the background, like laughing, crying, like gasping. And so then, they just kept like, here's a Pop-Tart. And then they would spit it in his mouth. And it's like, it's a good thing this is on a late at night. This feels weird to me watching it.
That sounds like something where they had 30 seconds of good material and tried to stretch it into 8 minutes or so. And, A, yeah, you didn't need to tell me what show that was on. And B, I'm not sure I can really talk because I'm on this show. So, I mean, hey, that's it. That's how it goes. We should probably start the actual show. So we stop talking about vomiting birds and Saturday Night Live.
Both. Yeah. Let's change the subject on both of those. Tom, we are doing another listener questions episode. We're finishing up the questions that we had from last week, bunch of Ohio State stuff. It is technically almost game week. Almost, if you think about how it's game week for the Buckeyes and that they're in game preparation. Like, does that count?
Sure. I mean, that's fine. They're more than a week away from the game, but it's basically fall camp's over. So now you're sort of shifting into game prep mode. So yeah, I think it's safe to say that things are shaping up for it to be officially a game week, whether it's a game week and a half. I blame the TV networks for putting this on a Thursday for any confusion that may be ensuing right now.
It is. It kind of squishes everything, but that does take us to our very first question in this week's episode.
Yeah, the first question is from @DaleRenicky, and he has 3 separate questions. First one though, breakdown of Minnesota. And, it's an interesting team to play first because it's a team that has veterans in a bunch of spots. They're talented in a bunch of spots, but I don't know if they're talented in the spots that are going to really enable them to hurt Ohio State. They've got a good veteran offensive line. You got a quarterback in Tanner Morgan, who's back, been the starting quarterback there for, it feels like 7 years now. Got Mo Ibrahim, who's been starting running back there for, it feels like 1,000 years now, who's, a really, really good running back, probably one of the best running backs in the Big Ten. But you lost Rashad Bateman. They just lost their leading returning receiver to an injury that may or may not drag on into, keep him from playing in that game. So it's like, they're good, but they're good in ways that I don't know if they necessarily match up that well with the Ohio State defense.
Yeah, and they return 10 starters on offense, 10 starters on defense. They return like 7 or 8 guys who have started on the offensive line. That defense, though, gave up 30 points a game last year. So, yes, congratulations on returning all of those guys, and they will be better. But what's better, 24 points per game, 25 points per game giving up? So it's a defense that has issues, and it's an offense that we know Mohamed Ibrahim is really, really good. He's a really tough runner. So that's going to be the focus for the Ohio State defense. And, that guy, he carried the ball, maybe 27, 28 times a game last year and was just the absolute workhorse for them. And you wonder if can he do that again? I mean, how much it was a 7 games last year, and he still carried the ball 201 times. And so it's like nearly 30 carries a game. And is there any wear and tear that this year, is he a lesser player? I don't, we'll see. Probably not right out of the gate. He's going to be pretty fresh game one. That's my opinion. I don't think he's going to have had too much work by that point. But yeah, they're limited, and that pass defense, even with the new starting quarterback for Ohio State, I feel like the pass rush isn't necessarily going to be there for Minnesota, which means the coverage is going to have some issues. So I'm not saying it's going to be a cakewalk, and we have been talking about how, like 14 to 17 points, that sort of thing. It certainly could be more, but these early season things, on the road, get in, get out. Don't worry about looking great or doing anything like that. Just get the win and move on to the next one. There's some capability here. They're limited in too many places.
Yeah, there's a couple spots where Ohio State could potentially be vulnerable, and Minnesota's not necessarily going to be able to take advantage of those. And the other thing that plays into this is September 2nd. This is not November 17th. If you're going to Minneapolis in mid-November, well, then you've got some issues, that there was Ohio State played in their 2014, played up there, and the game time temperature was like 15 degrees. It was maybe the coldest Ohio State game in the last 40, 50 years. You're up there September 2nd, unless I have not looked at the long-term forecast, but I am assuming there is not going to be a, Alberta Clipper or something coming down from the plains of Saskatchewan to bring us, a blizzard or anything like that on September 2nd. So that's a break for Ohio State. The lack of, like really explosive playmaker wide receivers, that's a break for Ohio State. So yeah, I think Minnesota is going to probably be a pretty good team, and Minnesota is probably going to end up being, this could be a game where in December, the college football playoff has Minnesota ranked 24th in their, college football playoff rankings. And this is a ranked win for Ohio State, but it's also somewhat a lower risk ranked win for Ohio State, where it's not a team that necessarily is going to be able to threaten them the way that other teams might later in the year.
The season opener for Buckeyes, the Buckeye fans always build up the teams better than they are in terms of the season openers. I remember starting back in 2002, Texas Tech became this world beater before the Buckeyes ever played them. And the lore of these teams just grow and grow and grow as the games get nearer. But I think there's only so much growing the Gophers can do.
All right. So next one is, this is also from Dale, overview of the entire Buckeye coaching staff and predictions on who's the first to take a head coaching job elsewhere.
So I guess let's just start at quarterback, or Corey Dennis. I don't expect him to be taking a job anywhere soon, but I think, the proof is in what we've seen from the quarterbacks. That's the only way you can judge him. And Justin Fields has been pretty good, and everybody's going to give Ryan Day credit, and that's fine. But at this point, we have seen nothing to say, oh, this guy is terrible. I think that's, he seems safe to me. People wonder, people say he was just given a job because he's Urban Meyer's son-in-law. And it's well, that's the reason to get a foot in the door. That's not the reason to give him the quarterback position, the quarterback coaching position. That's a really big thing. And that's Brian Day's, that's his baby. And so here, take my baby, and, you're only going to give your baby to people you trust, basically.
Yeah. And he's, you can have the conversation about exactly how much credit you want to give him versus Justin Fields' talent versus Ryan Day's coaching ability about quarterbacks and development ability about quarterbacks and talent evaluation ability of quarterbacks. Those are all fair questions, but until you have an issue, I don't think you can really, say that he's not a good coach. I mean, we'll find out a lot more this year when there's a, brand spanking new starting quarterback and all of that. But, 2 years ago, go back to some of our shows over the summer, and it was how much is Justin Fields really going to, be able to do? First time starter, redshirt freshman. And then he came out and, completely blew away all possible expectations. So I don't think you really have grounds to question him. It's fair to say, how much credit do you want to give him for working with the talent that he has around him, and with Ryan Day there, also there. But yeah, I think it's I don't think you can say, I don't think he's a very good coach. The results have all been very good so far. And so as long as they stay that way, Ryan Day knows a lot about coaching. Ryan Day knows a lot about quarterbacks. So presumably Ryan Day has a pretty good sense for quarterback coaching, and Ryan Day has not only hired him, but kept him. So seems like that should be a pretty good check mark in Corey Dennis's column as well. Tony Alford's another interesting one, running back coach. I thought for sure, he is a former Colorado State running back. I thought for sure he was going to be the head coach of Colorado State after what's his name, the former Georgia assistant, had to leave a couple of years ago. He had some health issues, and the trend was not great there. And they hired Steve Adazio, and it was like, that's a choice. I mean, that is definitely a choice you could make. But yeah, Alfred has been fantastic on the recruiting trail. He has stacked talent in that running back room in a way that really no one has stacked talent in the running back room before. Just continues to bring in very, very highly touted players. He's got Dallin Hayden committed for 2022. Richard Young, who's a 5-star for 2023, is, seemingly trending towards Ohio State. And so it seems like that's just going to keep rolling. And even the ones that he missed, like Bijan Robinson, is like, well, that wasn't really on him for missing, because Bijan Robinson wanted to come to Ohio State, and then his family basically said no because it was too far from Arizona. So he has just kept going. The results have been good on the field. You have, there's a lot of, that room has always seemed pretty harmonious in terms of, personnel management and managing the personalities and all that kind of stuff. He seems like he would be a good head coach. I thought for sure he was going to get the Colorado State gig a couple of years ago. So I don't know now, is he interested in a MAC head coaching job? Maybe, I don't know, but that's, he's someone who I think would be a good head coach at some point.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And in terms of how well he's doing at Ohio State, the Buckeyes just moved a career 8-yard per carry average guy to linebacker. So it lets you know that they're doing pretty well at running back. He is my pick to be the first head coach from this staff. And I think it probably already should happen, because anytime you talk to him, like he is such a father figure to these guys. He is exactly what you would want in today's head coach. He's very similar to Ryan Day in that manner, where it's about the kids, and they're taking care of them and making sure they're all in the right place. And you've seen him interact with, he makes fun of his players, he rips on them, he loves them, they love him, they rip on him, and it's just a really good relationship. And so I would expect him, like I said, I think he's going to be the first head coach. You wonder, like, but what now? Like the granted, the Colorado State job will be open in a couple of years. We know that. Like that's obvious, and because they did not, that's Steve Adazio's short trajectory, and so that job will be open again.
Yeah, and you've got, you're going to have some MAC jobs open this year. I mean, the Ohio University job opened up this summer when Frank Solich suddenly retired. The interim guy who was their offensive coordinator, whose name I'm now completely blanking on, just took over. If they have a decent year, he probably just gets it full time after that. Bowling Green will probably open at some point, because that seems like that's going not particularly well. Akron is probably going to open after this year, because that is going not particularly well. Kent State could open a year from now, because Sean Lewis has things like really cranking there. I don't know if you'd want to go take an Akron job or a Bowling Green job, because that sets you up to be the guy who goes 2-10 and 3-9. And then, if Colorado State does open, is Colorado State going to hire a guy who was 5-17? I mean, maybe. When Akron hired Gene Chizik from Iowa State, I think his record was exactly 5-17 after 2 years at Iowa State. So, it's not impossible for that to happen, but, is Tony Alford better served by, can he get the Kent State job where that thing's kind of rolling a little bit? That's still not an easy place to win. But if, you're taking over a 6-6 team and you can just kind of keep them at a 6-6 or 7-6, 7-5 or 8-4 kind of level, like, sure, maybe. So yeah, he's a good pick. The guy who I would normally, and I think a lot of people would just assume is the answer here, is Brian Hartline, wide receivers coach. Just an incredible recruiter, an incredible position coach, gets incredible results. However deep you want to talk about Tony Alford having his room, Brian Hartline's room is even deeper with as much or more talent. It is, and, former NFL player, very personable. He seems like the easy answer here, but you keep hearing from people who talk to him like, yeah, I don't think he's going anywhere. I think he's happy where he is. I don't know if he even needs to be a coordinator. He may just be happy being a wide receivers coach at Ohio State. He made his NFL money, so it's not like he needs the money. Everyone you talk to, I think if anyone from the outside of the program assumes like, oh yeah, he's for sure going to be a head coach, and just in, a year, in 2 years, everyone who talks to him comes away going, no, I think he's going to stay at Ohio State. So he, I think, would be the answer that most people outside the program would assume was the correct answer here. but I don't know if it is. He may just be happy being what he is and doing what he's doing and just continuing to crank out 5-star receivers every year.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I keep going back to the fact that watching him talk to high school coaches at the Ohio State coaches clinic a couple of years ago, he said that this was his calling. It came, he didn't expect it, was never planning on being a coach, but it found him, and then it became his calling. And for me, the calling aspect is the teaching of the young kids and the college kids and the high school kids. And I know that I've read that there's been offers from the NFL. He does not seem like an NFL position coach to me, because that is not a calling. That is a job. That's just running over stuff with professionals. Whereas you have an opportunity to shape people in the job he has now. And it really feels like that's more, when people talk about a calling, that's what, for me, nobody's been called to the NFL. That's not, I feel it in my soul. I need to be in the NFL. No, it's like I have an opportunity to shape people, to change people, to help people. And that's more of along the lines of what college coaches do as opposed to professional league coaches. And so I know everybody just thinks, oh, how are they going to keep him? He's going to be an offensive coordinator. They're going to have to do this. They're going to have to do that. He's a different guy. He's very different. This is a guy, when he was in the NFL, had a carry out that he worked at, so like he thinks on different levels than what you would expect of regular coaches. So I don't see him going anywhere right now. There's been no hints, no rumors. So at this point, he's happy. Ryan Day's happy with him. And so I don't think Buckeye fans should be concerned at this point about losing him. And if you are, they're going to do everything they can to keep him.
And there's a way to give him a bump to passing game coordinator or whatever, and you give him a salary bump. But again, with someone who made whatever $30 million or whatever he made in the NFL, like I don't know if does that matter? Does he just want to, and maybe that's not, and it's just the same stuff that could keep him at Ohio State long term in that exact same position. Maybe means some of the normal incentives to keep someone there don't necessarily apply. So that's a really interesting one. I'll let you go first on Kevin Wilson. Kevin Wilson is obviously a former head coach, Indiana, offensive coordinator, brilliant offensive line, fantastic person to talk to. I mean, really, really insightful, interesting guy. What do you think? Is Kevin Wilson going to be a head coach again?
I know he wanted to, and he thought he would be, and probably certainly should have been. But now, that was a few years back when there were maybe a few more options. Now it doesn't seem like, the further away he gets from Indiana, you feel like that whole ordeal is softened, but stuff still gets brought back up, and it would get brought back up just as, look at the Tennessee Greg Schiano thing. Like, that was decades ago, and it still was brought up enough to be refreshed. And so you've got this, Kevin Wilson's perfectly happy now. His son now plays at Ohio State. And is this an opportunity for him to spend, say, his last 5 years coaching? I don't know how long he's going to coach. It could be 15 years. But these 5 years that Toby Wilson is going to be at Ohio State with him, is this an opportunity? Like, is this a father's dream and a coach's dream to have this situation be with your son? And also, well, yeah, you're the offensive coordinator at Ohio State and things are going well. The allure, the love, the desire to be a head coach is probably never going away. But also, this is less stress. This is less time consuming. This is more fun. And it's not like, like I never get to get the groceries in terms of like the Bill Parcells stuff. I never get to recruit the guys I want. It's like you're getting plenty of the guys you want, and things are going well, and the offense is doing just fine. So I think you do just fine again as a head coach, but right now I think he's good. He seems good when we talk to him.
Yeah. And, you're making enough money as an Ohio State head coach that you're probably taking a decent pay cut to go be a MAC head coach or something like that. So is that, as an Ohio State coordinator, making more money than being a MAC head coach? Are you really that driven to be a MAC head coach? And the trend with MAC head coaches, a lot of them has been hiring the younger guys, hiring the, we'll get to Al Washington in a minute, but hiring the younger guy, younger, more energetic rather than the older guys. And, hiring, not that Kevin Wilson's 75 years old or anything, but, hiring the older guys who have been head coaches before, that has worked out really great with Frank Solich for a million years at Ohio University. But there are a lot of times when it's Terry Bowden at Akron, and then it doesn't work at all. And Bowling Green is going through, hiring a long time assistant in Scott Loeffler, and that is not working out great either. So, I think the trend is younger in a lot of those cases, which means there may not be so many opportunities. And, he seems perfectly happy doing what he's doing and having a lot of success doing what he's doing. So, if this is home and your son is playing there for 5 years, he's a walk-on center, like, it seems like that might keep you there. Another guy who I think probably would have been a fantastic head coach at some point and just never got the opportunity was Larry Johnson. He was just kind of like on that Penn State staff for a million years and just never got that opportunity, never chose to leave. And he's another guy who, he was the interim coach for the Michigan State game last year. That meant a lot to him, obviously, to be the interim coach, become the first African-American to win a game as the head coach at Ohio State. He was like emotional after that game talking about it. That was a very cool moment for him. But, at this point, there have been Larry Johnson retirement rumors since like Joey Bosa was at Ohio State. So, everyone is perpetually telling you that Larry Johnson is 2 years away from retiring. And then lo and behold, here he is coaching all these years later. But he seems to just love what he does. You look at him coaching at summer camps, just random kids who will never have a Power 5 offer in their lives. And he is coaching them up it's the sixth day that we've been at Ohio State summer camp, and we're all tired of being there. And he's like, oh man, he cannot wait to coach this guy who's maybe going to get a chance to play for Capital someday. He just looks like someone who just wants to keep doing what he's doing and just do it forever.
Yeah. And he's a guy that also keeps in touch with recruits that got away, with his former players from both schools or all schools. So I do, Tom, want to mention Greg Stedrawa, who you skipped over disrespectfully. Remember back at the Rose Bowl, he talked when there was an opening at BG, he said he would be interested in that. And I think we know that opening will be opening again here in the not too distant future. And maybe he will be interested in that again, but we'll see where that goes. Larry Johnson would have been a very fine head coach, but I also think he would have gotten, there would have been something missing for him because he does love coaching. And when you talk to head coaches, a lot of them say, like, what do you miss most about being an assistant coach? It's coaching, because the head coach doesn't get to do it as much.
You're right. I did skip Stud. That's my fault. That maybe have been a subconscious thing, because offensive line coaches generally don't get a lot of opportunities to be head coaches. Like Sam Pittman at Arkansas is a recent exception to that. But yeah, he has had, I feel like Stud has had a couple of conversations and it hasn't gotten there for him. And you wonder if that may just be, he's someone who is just like, he is meant to be a position coach. He does a great job as a position coach. They've done a fantastic job of talent development at the offensive line. Maybe that's where he stays. Someone who has shown some interest in upward mobility is Al Washington, the linebackers coach. He had a notable flirtation with Tennessee's defensive coordinator position last offseason. He's someone who I think, if it's not Tony Alford, if it's not Brian Hartline, I think Al Washington might be the logical next name on that list, where young, energetic, has done a nice job recruiting, has been a few different places. He kind of gives off the head coach vibe. Like every time he's standing at the podium, you're like, I could see that guy being a head coach someday and running his own program. And is he the guy who gets the Kent State job or the Akron job or the whatever in the MAC next? I think if you're looking at defensive coordinator positions, obviously you're interested in continuing to move up the chain, and if you're a defensive coordinator in the SEC, at that point maybe you're getting a better job than a MAC head coaching job. That you then have an opportunity to get if you're a successful SEC defensive coordinator, then maybe you're getting a low level SEC job. Are you then the next head coach at Vanderbilt or something like that? They just hired Clark Lee, who was a Notre Dame defensive coordinator. So, you can get a job as a head coach in the SEC or the Big Ten or the ACC. as a coordinator, you don't necessarily have to have that first interim step into or intermediate step into like a MAC head coaching job. But yeah, wherever it is, Al Washington feels like someone who is probably right at the top of this list for me.
Yeah, and does he need to become a defensive coordinator first? And he almost left for Tennessee last year to be their defensive coordinator. I'm just thinking here in the last couple of minutes, I wonder if his next job is Ohio State defensive line coach. Everybody keeps talking about who is going to replace Larry Johnson. Maybe that's him, and then they bring in another linebacker coach, because again, you've got 2 linebackers in the defense and sometimes 3. And could his time be better spent somewhere else? If you're gonna have to pay him to keep him, like, I'm not saying you're going to push Larry Johnson out. I'm just saying, like, when the time comes, and I believe he coached the defensive line at Boston College as well. Certainly played defensive line at Boston College, but we've seen guys flip back and forth from that spot. It's maybe nothing, just something I wanted to speak into existence in case it happens. Then I could tell people, hey, remember where you heard it first. Remember whose idea that was. So yeah, he's obviously he's going to be a head coach eventually. We'll see when. The Kerry Combs, I went from linebackers to corners, and I immediately went to Kerry Combs. So I apologize for skipping over Matt Barnes. We'll get to him. Kerry Combs, I think he's also of that age where you wouldn't expect them to then take over a program. Unless like Luke Fickell goes, Kerry Combs being a Cincinnati guy, but then that might free Marcus Freeman to leave Notre Dame to go to Cincinnati, and it feels like it's he might be frozen out there as well. So I think he, even though you generally do go from defensive coordinator at Ohio State to a full head coaching job somewhere, he doesn't seem like he's in any. Has he ever been asked about being a head coach? He doesn't get asked very often about it. I don't recall any of his answers about that subject off the top of my head.
I don't remember it either. And he was a high school head coach, obviously, before he came to Ohio State the first time. And he's just an absolutely relentless recruiter. And he's an energy guy and a culture guy and all that kind of stuff. So it seems like he's got a lot of the pieces you'd want in a good head coach. But it seems strange. But energy is not an issue. Like, normally you want the young, energetic guy. Like, energy is not an issue with Kerry Combs. So he's someone who, you're right. I mean, if Luke Fickell leaves and they don't bring back Marcus Freeman, like, there's a perfectly acceptable candidate up in Columbus. Like, you bring him in, he is a Cincinnati guy. He's going to recruit the heck out of Cincinnati in that area, and and has been an effective recruiter all over the country. So yeah, I mean, but that's where I would see him going. I don't see him taking the Akron job. I don't see him taking the Bowling Green job. Cincinnati would be where he might fit there. But yeah, I'm with you. I don't know why. It feels like that's kind of like coordinator, ace recruiter, maybe position coach, in some form or fashion at some point again. But that's kind of where he seems to fit to me. And Matt Barnes and Parker Fleming are the last two, and they kind of both fit the same to me. Matt Barnes has a few more years of experience, so he's probably a little ahead of Parker Fleming on this curve. Parker Fleming, and this is his first year as one of the 10 assistants. So this is a 5 years from now kind of conversation with him. But they're both guys who you hear people talk about. They're very intelligent, very personable, very outgoing, and both are guys who I think could be head coaches at some point. Barnes, like, it wouldn't shock me if Barnes got a head coaching job a year or two from now. But I think Washington and Alford, I think I would put ahead of him on that list. But he's someone who maybe he becomes the assistant defensive coordinator at some point in a year or two, and then that turns that into a head coaching gig somewhere. And Parker Fleming, he's not going to be the special teams coach forever. He'll probably move up. As someone else moves, he may slide up the chain somewhere there and be a head coach somewhere 4 or 5 years from now. But definitely, this is still very early in his career, similar to Corey Dennis. Like, he is very early in his career, and that's several years down the line.
I believe Parker said he was helping out with the defense when he's not doing special teams. But Matt Barnes, to me, I mean, he's a future superstar. I think he'll be a head coach uh, almost certainly, unless he just chooses not to be. I really like him. I think that's going to be a tough loss when he does leave Ohio State for whatever it is, and that's going to be a guy that you're going to try to keep, but you can only keep so many, because I think he's going to be a defensive coordinator here pretty soon. This might be the year where everybody gets to see the improvement of Ohio State, and then who gets the credit for it, and how much credit does Barnes get? Does that turn into a defensive coordinator job somewhere? Like, Tom, I'm already going to tell you what's going to happen because it just came to me. So when Jeff Hafley takes over Michigan next year, he's calling up Barnes. Barnes is going to be his DC. And so that's going to be incredibly fun to watch, to partake in, to talk to those guys again. And so, yeah, that's actually what's going to happen. And then how long after that will Barnes be head coach? Could be a couple of years.
And there's a scenario there where that turns into Boston College head coach Al Washington. That's a possibility too. I mean, I think you'd want to be a coordinator before you got a Power 5 gig. So maybe that's what keeps that from happening. But I mean, yeah, Washington played at Boston College, was an assistant at Boston College. It's not crazy to think that could be how that all played out. And then, boy, new head coach, Michigan head coach Jeff Hafley, really, really rating the Ohio State staff and really, really hosing Ryan Day in multiple ways, stealing coaches in two different ways. It's just diabolical.
That's what he gets for hiring Hafley in the first place. Never should have done it.
You want ants? That's how you get ants. That's it's the college football version of this is how you get ants. Boy, we have done almost a whole show and we haven't even gotten through Dale's whole question yet.
I feel like maybe this is the last question of this show, and we hold the rest for the others.
We may get another show of bird vomit yet. So yes. Let's do the third one from Dale. First three players Ohio State can't afford to lose to injury this year. And, I think last year this was a very easy question where number one is Justin Fields. I guess you'd have to have CJ Stroud on that list, but it's not really, I don't know that he's number one on the list. And I don't, there's not, what you're looking for is drop off of talent. And I think there's an argument to be made that, you look at the thinner positions and, is Sevyn Banks number one on this list, where you don't want to lose your number one corner, because then you're, if Denzel Burke is the third corner, or Ryan Watts is the third corner, or Lechin Cavazos is the third corner, what's the drop off there and how much depth do they really feel comfortable with there? I think I'm going with Sevyn Banks number one on that list. What about you?
That's a good one. I'm thinking the other problem with this is I'm thinking Josh Proctor, but we don't know how good he is. If behind him is Bryson Shaw or Marcus Hooker. I want Josh Proctor to stay healthy, especially, again, as important as that free safety spot is in this defense. At least with corners, they've got 6-7 guys. With the free safety, they may end up having to put other guys back there. Like, is it Court Williams? Does he get back there again? Is it Jansen Dunn, Andre Turrentine, the true freshmen in there, guys who just in order to build that depth. So for me, I think my first guy is going to have to be Josh Proctor. Tom, who's your second?
I think you got to look somewhere on the interior of the defensive line where, look at how different the defensive line looked when they lost Tommy Togiai last year for the championship game against Alabama. I don't think you can lose like a Haskell Garrett. I mean, yes, they have Teron Vincent at the 3-tech too, but we've been talking about, is it going to be Haskell Garrett and Teron Vincent on the inside, and then like one of them's the nose and one of them's the 3-tech? Because Jerron Cage has not been out there the last couple times we've seen practice. So how there's one depth piece at nose. You get Antoine Jackson, and then after that, it's like like Tyleik Williams, I guess. I mean, there's not a lot of depth there at nose. So you really and Garrett's an All-American. So that's really someone you couldn't afford to lose. So I think that is, I think people are probably screaming at their phones right now, like, well, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson. It's like, yeah, but the other wide receivers are so good that I don't know if there's the drop off between 1 and 2 there that we're talking about maybe on the interior of the defensive line.
Yeah, and I'm skipping over, almost ignoring the receivers because of that. But then I'm thinking Garrett Wilson's backup is a true freshman. And yes, Marvin Harrison, we have raved about him. I've said this many times. He does not look like a true freshman. Technically, though, Tom, he still is a true freshman. And Garrett Wilson is such a relief for a quarterback, an inexperienced quarterback, an experienced quarterback. Any quarterback would love to have Garrett Wilson. And I wasn't even going to put him on this list, but I've now he's going to have to be my number 2 guy just because he is so solid, consistent. Whatever you need, wherever you want to throw it, he can get it. That's what your quarterback needs. And the drop off from him to Marvin Harrison, while Marvin Harrison has done nothing to think there is like much of a drop off, I still think there's a drop off from Garrett Wilson to anybody in the Ohio State room, anybody in the Big Ten, anybody else nationally to what he can do. So I'm going to go with him number 2 just because you started to bring it up and I had to jump on it.
It's not, I mean, you're not wrong, but also I think you're wrong because if you lose Garrett Wilson, you have Chris Olave, you have Jackson Smith-Njigba. Even if you're assuming Marvin Harrison is like not ready for prime time, you've got Olave, you've got Jackson Smith-Njigba, you've got Jeremy Ruckert, you've got the guys coming out of the backfield. You know, I mean, Trey Henderson out in the flat or Mayan Williams out in the flat. I mean, you have other options there. I don't know that materially impacts the offense the way that losing a nose tackle, losing a number 1 corner might impact the defense. I think there's workarounds there where even if Marvin Harrison is not what we both, I think he is, and even if they can't put, you know, can you swap in Julian Fleming there? Could you swap in, someone else? You know, can you slide Jackson Smith-Njigba outside and move Emeka Egbuka inside into the slot? I mean, you know, there's a bunch of possibilities there, and they have treated those different wide receiver positions as pretty interchangeable to a certain degree. I mean, Garrett Wilson has gone outside, inside, outside in his career, so it's not like you're locked into these one spots. So, yeah, that's why I don't necessarily think that's that would be as big of a concern for me. Who is
maybe the answer? Maybe the answer among the receivers is just like what happened with the offense without Chris Olave in last year's Big Ten championship game, where they certainly missed him, and the offense was stunted because of it. Of course, Justin Fields' hurt hand maybe had something to do with that. My 3rd guy, Zach Harrison. I think you need a dynamic pass rusher. And whether that's Tyreek Smith or Zach Harrison, I just think you can't lose one of those guys, and because now you're moving everybody up one, and we still haven't seen Javonte Jean-Baptiste become that guy yet. Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau are both true freshmen. You can't rely on them so much. Like you can rely on them enough for what you expect for them. You can't expect one of them to be Zach Harrison or a Bosa or a Chase Young. And maybe we can't expect Zach Harrison to be that, but I kind of am. I think he's going to be very dynamic, very disruptive. And if you have a questionable secondary, to lose your best pass rusher, that's not going to be good. So I think you need as much pass rushing as possible. And so losing Zach Harrison, I think, would be worse than losing a defensive tackle because there are bodies there, and you can kind of replace Teron Vincent and Haskell Garrett with one or the other. But you can also do that with Tyreek Smith and Zach Harrison. But for me, I'm going Zach Harrison, my number 3. What about you?
Zach Harrison was actually going to be my answer as well, because the stuff you mentioned, but also you got to remember Tyler Friday is already out. So Tyler Friday, who I think we had probably both penciled in as at least one of the top 2 pairs and probably like the number 3 defensive end going into the year, he's out and might be out for the year. So you're already missing one guy there. And it's not like the depth is like this is some critical shortage of defensive ends. If they lose Zach Harrison, you still have Tyreek Smith and Javonte Jean-Baptiste and Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau and Darian Henry-Young and Cormonte Hamilton and on and on. I mean, they've got bodies there. They've got talent there. But yeah, I think, if you go back and you listen to us talking about Zach Harrison and, this is the year that the Zach Harrison thing finally all comes together. And then this is the year that Zach Harrison is going to be your 10, 12 sack kind of guy, potentially. That's hard to replace. They had a lot of talent on the defensive line in 2019, but if you don't have Chase Young out there, like you're going to notice that Chase Young isn't out there. That is someone that is not easy to replace. Zach Harrison is we'll see if he gets to the Chase Young level or approaches the Chase Young level, but he's someone who has the possibility of doing that. And there's not a lot of other guys on that team that have the possibility of doing that. Tyreek Smith is going to be good, but I don't know if Tyreek Smith has that ceiling, because that's really not a fair thing to put on people.
Yeah, and that potential, you want to see it on the field, and to not have it now, you've taken a pretty big hit. Tom, how long have we gone?
I feel like we've gone at least half an hour, right? Maybe more than that.
Do we want to do this last one and then call it a show?
Sure. Okay. From @BoBremer, best comedy shows of all time. I mean, there is one recurring thing that we reference constantly on this show to the point of annoyance. So I guess, I don't know, maybe we shouldn't talk about that one, but there's others that are good. What do you think? Well,
but I don't think The Simpsons, can it be the best if we've stopped watching it for 15 years? Was it the best at one time? Yes. But it's like a boxer maybe who, like, yes, Muhammad Ali was the best boxer of all time. Now he's not, so do you measure them like in a short window, or do you use the entire window? For me, I have to go the entire window. And that's why for me, and I tweeted this out last week, it's 30 Rock for me, which is what was great from the first episode to the last episode, completely absurdist, which I like. Some people may not like it. It's a little bit hectic. It's a little bit dumb. Tracy Morgan is a terrible actor, which also kind of plays into it. It works. It's, for me, I think it's the most consistent laugh out loud show, whereas a Parks and Rec took a year or two to hit its stride. Cheers is always great. Night Court, I love all of those. But I'm going with 30 Rock. And of course, Seinfeld is the greatest sitcom of all time. But the first year or so is like, you had to be dedicated to watch it, which I did. And I can appreciate it. I can accept that answer. But me personally, even though I love watching Seinfeld and I'll go back and watch it, it's still just as good as it's ever been. I'm a 30 Rock person. Where are you?
Can I make a confession? I've never watched 30 Rock. Never once. So this might be the last episode of this podcast. Tony may not be speaking to me anymore. So I've never watched.
We're going to do a new show where you watch it and then we talk about each episode.
Oh boy, another podcast. Just what I was hoping for. Good. Let's do that. Especially, let's do that in the fall, into football season. We have so much time. It'll be great. Yeah, I have not watched 30 Rock. I mean, to me, it's Seinfeld. Just because, Seinfeld did not have the decline phase. It was like, there was like one, but the Puerto Rican Day Parade episode does not really hold up particularly well and wasn't particularly loved at that time. But outside of that, it was just kind of like, why are you taking the show off the air? It's still really good. And the answer was because you don't want it to have that decline phase. Mm-hmm. That was always the show that was just, it was so well written. I mean, the characters were well written, but it was also the plot lines. You'd have 3 separate plot lines and they would all converge at the end. And it was like, how, yes, they have done this in the past, but how could these possibly all coincide? And then they all come together, and it's the end of the, it's the end, the end of the show. All 3 things converge and turn into this one kind of neat bow to all these episodes. Just so many funny lines, so many. Just how often do you find yourself thinking of, anytime anything's bright, it's my rods and my cones. Oh, and broccoli, vile weed.
Yes.
Yeah. This is all the same episode. And, that's not the episode that's necessarily considered the best episode of all time. Yeah. To me, I think it has to be Seinfeld. In terms of short peak, I think Arrested Development was there, but the Arrested Development first 3 seasons, that's one that would have benefited from not coming back, because the Netflix one where it came back was just like, oh no, this isn't good at all. This is bad. In fact, if it had just stayed with the Fox 3 or 4 seasons, I think you might have had that in the argument. I was a huge Arrested Development fan, but yeah, I think I've got to go with Seinfeld. But yeah, I can respect Cheers as an option there. I can respect The Simpsons as an option there. I liked Parks and Rec a lot, that one. But you're right. It started a little slow. Seinfeld did start a little slow as they were sort of figuring out. But then once they kind of hit their mark, then yeah, it was one of the best I've seen. But yeah, I think I do have to go with Seinfeld. But apparently I haven't seen the best comedy in the history of TV yet. So that's on me. Sorry.
30 Rock is on Netflix. I've been rewatching it, but Seinfeld is just so much a part of our culture. Like when you eat chicken in bed, you rock back and forth, right? Like when you're eating your Kenny Rogers roasters, you're like, you get into it. And that's because of Seinfeld. Before you would just eat like a normal person, but now, no, you're into it. And, we all have, our friend Bob Sacamano, where we go buy our rat hats and all sorts of different stuff. And so I think culturally it's the greatest sitcom of all time. Personally, I just laugh at 30 Rock a lot, and I wanted to give it some props. So, Tom, go ahead.
I feel like I am contractually obligated to mention Three's Company here because it is, it's just every episode is exactly the same. There is, some sort of misunderstanding about something that was overheard by, by Mr. Roper, Mr. Furley, and, oh, what? And there's something about the way those two characters, and they're just bit characters, but they just would look at the camera, and Mr. Furley would get the big Don Knotts eye, like woo, and Mr. Roper would look at the camera and like make the where it raised the eyebrow, like I'm slick, It was just such a terrible nonsense, and then Jack Tripper would fall over the couch and all that, and but again, that was one that was just like, it was a terrible show, but it was, I always really enjoyed that as a kid. And when we had when I lived in an apartment 20 years ago where there was a bar across the street, we called it the Regal Beagle. So, you can't deny that's the cultural influence of Three's Company either. No,
I agree. And I loved it as a kid as well. And I remember, I don't know where this was, whether it was a stand-up comedian or something. He's like, you ever notice, like with Three's Company, there's always like a misunderstanding? It was like, that's true.
You needed a stand-up comic to point that out to you, did you?
Yeah, I did. And well, it's just like, then you go back and like, oh yeah. But yeah, it's, Larry and everybody, the gang, Janet, Cindy, Terry, Chrissy, like every year, contract negotiations, they'd have to bring in a new blonde character and lose the old one. And it's like, it's still held up. Maybe. I don't remember. I just know it was a show that was a lot of fun. Certainly didn't watch it at the time. Maybe early on, I got to see like the last couple of seasons. But yeah, I do wonder how well it holds up. I know John Ritter is fantastic in it. And that was a good one. Yeah. Anything else, Tom? Any others that you're going to pull out of the woodwork here and give some props to?
Since everyone is right now going, have you not watched TV since 1999? Like Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I've enjoyed Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Mm-hmm. I don't know that I'm up to the current season of Brooklyn Nine-Nine. That's one I caught on too late. Mm-hmm. That's one that I've enjoyed, but I don't know if I'm up to the current season yet. But that's they had characters on there that I didn't care for, and then the characters disappeared, and it was like, oh, this show just got even better. That's wonderful. That's great. Good.
Were you responsible for those disappearances, Tom?
Not as far as you know.
All right. Anything else before we get out of here?
No. This was what a fun surprise. We were anticipating doing like 17 questions, and we got 1 3-parter, and it was like, oh, well, it turns out there was a lot to talk about there. So good news. We'll have another listener question show coming up sometime soon.
Yeah. And I'm looking at one of these, and the one question is like 4 different questions. So we'll see how long that show goes.
You know what I like about our listeners? They ask good questions, and also they ask involved questions. That's my favorite part of our listeners. So thank you all for asking. Thank you all for listening, and all of that. We do genuinely appreciate that.
100%, because doing a listener's question show without listener questions is really hard. It makes me busy trying to come up with questions for Tom to answer as my alter ego, Langdon Alger. But anyway, that will do it for today's show. Thank you guys for listening and watching. Check out BuckeyeScoop.com for the absolute latest, what's going on with the Ohio State football sphere, recruiting, the football team, the upcoming games, all of that. And also subscribe at youtube.com/BuckeyeScoop if you have not yet. That way you can be alerted when videos like this drop and all kinds of other videos that we are having to work. So thank you guys, and we will talk to you later.